I do tell this to owners sometimes. I try to say it very nicely, but it is true. Indoor cats are in prison. They're nice prisons. They have a great health care policy. The food's good, you know. The wardens are companionable and kind, but the fact of the matter is it's a prison because they have very little choice over what happens to them there, okay? So we see more and more indoor cats. As I mentioned in the previous lecture, seeing a lot more owners that are acquiring sometimes large groups of cats in still typical sized homes. And what I see now, you know, years ago, you pretty much saw cats for litter box problems. And now the vast majority of cats that I see come to me either for inter-cat aggression or aggression directed towards people inside the home. And then they also often have an ancillary house soiling or marking problem, okay? And absolutely, I believe, and there's, again, one study at least that shows that indoor cats have a higher incidence of behavior problems than outdoor cats or indoor-outdoor cats. And maybe this is just my cognitive bias, but I really do think some of these are directly related to the fact that the cats don't go outside anymore, okay? So we talked about this in the other lecture, but for those of you that crept in for this one, large home range in a feral setting, all right? So 64 acres for group living females, 182 for solitary females, and males is even larger than that. They spend a huge amount of their time hunting just to stay alive, all right? So it's approximately 10 mice a day. If you're thinking about 30 calories per mouse, the average cat takes in about 300 calories a day. That's if they're not nursing kittens, by the way, where obviously their caloric requirement goes up considerably. Even if you look at a time budget, 46% of a 24-hour period. That includes sleeping. So we're not talking 46% of their waking time necessarily. All right? So they spend a lot of time just getting one mouse or bird. Years ago, my brother had a cat. It was an indoor-outdoor cat. He'd come over to my mom's house every day because she puts bird feeders out, you know, so there's birds all over. Yeah, well, it was. She was a phenomenal bird huntress, and it was fascinating to watch her, sad for the birds, but fascinating to watch the cat because she would come out and she would park herself down amongst the trees. She would crouch down there, and she literally would sit immobile for 30 minutes and let all the birds acclimate to her presence, and then eventually one of them would hop close enough and bam! She'd have it. And off she'd trot, proud as can be, okay? But think about the investment time, all right? Sometimes people get really upset when they try to play with cat toys and the cat just watches it, but I'm like, man, that's still enrichment, because think about that cat. She sat there for 30 minutes, literally just watching, nothing moving for 30 minutes until that bird gets close enough, and then pow! It's impressive. So other things they do with their time: finding shelter, raising their young, reproducing, and eluding predators, all right? So they they sleep a lot and snooze, but they have pretty busy lives, and there's a little danger thrown in there, and obviously variability every day, okay? And then what do our house cats get? And then they'll get in trouble for this, right? Okay? So what do we do with enrichment? I tell people what I'm trying to do with enrichment is bring the outside experience inside. If you can't let the cat out, then let's bring the outside experience inside as much as we can, because we need mental and physical stimulation. When you think about the average house, how much olfactory variability is in a household? Would you say that it's low, medium, or high? I would say probably low to medium, okay? What about tactile variability? low. Variability, meaning it changes. Sorry, that wasn't well explained. So like if I come home from the barn and I walk into my little mudroom laundry area, even though I try to clean the shoes and stuff off, I take my boots off and I put them away, and then I go into the house and I take my shoes and socks off and I walk back in the laundry room to do the laundry, and then I'm like, oh, there's sand all over the floor. That really irritates me. And then what happens? It changes my behavior, because then I have to go brush my feet off and I go get the dustpan and I got to clean it up, because if I leave it there, it'll annoy me, you know. So enrichment isn't always pleasant, but it affects your behavior and it changes the environment to encourage behavior, right? Remember the lecture before where cats that are under stress show less behavioral variability and more passive behaviors? Is it a good thing if you go into a house and the person that lives there does nothing really but lay on the couch watching television, get up, go to the bathroom, go into the kitchen, come back to the couch? What do we call that? Probably. Depression, probably. Okay? So, but with our cats, it's, oh, he's a good cat. All right. So we want to increase their repertoire of functionally normal behaviors, and I want to increase their problem-solving ability, but I also want to increase their behavioral plasticity. Because if there's not much olfactory change, there's not much change in the sounds that occur in a house on a day-to-day basis. You know, from a week to week to week, like the furniture's in the same place for the most part, you know, the owner does mostly the same things all the time. The odors really are not that different day to day. The activities aren't very different day to day. And a lot of these cats get acclimated to the same, right? And then something changes significantly. You get a new piece of furniture, you rearrange the furniture, somebody comes to visit and stays in the house, and what happens to some of these cats? They go berserk. Like, I don't mean like literally berserk, but they're like, oh my God. Like, it's such a transition. I want change to be routine. People often talk about with their dogs and stuff like, oh, my dogs like routine. Well, they probably do like routine, but routine change can be part of the routine. My dog's dinner routine is that she could eat dinner anywhere from 5 to 9 o'clock at night, depending on my schedule, whether we go to agility class, whether we go for a walk after work, whether I have to work late. That's the routine. The routine isn't I have to eat at 5 o'clock, because then if that doesn't happen, it's such a rigid thing that deviation from that's a huge deal. So I think so many of these cats live in such a rigid, unchanging environment that when something does change, they don't have the adaptability to go with the flow, and then they have a huge overreaction in some way. Whether that's they hide or they freak out and attack the person that came to visit or beat up the other cat or whatever, okay? So that's one of my purposes with enrichment too. So I use it as an adjunct to resolving problems or preventing problems, but also for treating cat problems, right? So we have to consider the cat or the animal's normal behavioral repertoire. What do cats naturally do? Are there any medical contraindications? Like, we're not going to do a lot of climbing enrichment for a cat that has a intervertebral disc disease, or maybe bad osteoarthritis in its hips. We need to find different ways to motivate the cat to move, not ask it to jump somewhere that is going to be dangerous or painful, okay? Are there dietary restrictions? If we do foraging enrichment, what do we have to work with there? Things that we can use or shouldn't use. And then obviously safety for the people and the animals. Like I said, as much as I want them to go outside, there are some environments where it is not safe to put them outside, or the danger of being outside outweighs the welfare danger of keeping the cat inside the house. So I want all sensory modalities. I want to hit all sensory modalities with enrichment. Some of these obviously are going to be combined together, but some of them may be individual. And then I want different aspects. So we want to mimic that predatory behavior that they spend so much time doing in a natural setting. These tie together, obviously, because we're probably not going to bring mice into the house. So we need to mimic predation differently, but we still have to feed the cat, but we want to feed the cat maybe in a more stimulating way. Like, how can we make the food look alive sometimes, all right? Exploration, I don't want the cat laying on the bed all the time. We want the cat to get up and move, and we want the cat to engage with the environment, you know? It's one of the things we look for even when we bring, for example, dogs come into the office. One of the things I look for is, does the dog explore the office, or does the dog hang out in the corner, the entire consult? Do they hide for a while and then they come out? Because a normal dog is going to explore at least a little. Their nose is going to go, what's that? What is that over there? What does that smell like? What does her shoe smell like? Where's she been? All right? But we want to do the same thing with the cats. So, looking at play predation, there's one study that looked at play in cats, and they found that cats where the owners played for greater than 15 minutes a day had fewer behavior problems than cats that got less than 5 minutes, or about 5 minutes a day. And even 15 minutes, I think, is kind of shabby for some of the cats, but again, it's better, obviously, than 5 minutes. So I tell people, depending on the cat, I tell people, I want an absolute minimum of 2 15-minute sessions a day. And some of the cats, like we get some of these young, active, you know, what I call the border collie, Belgian Malinois cats, you know, like they're the border collie, the cat version of a border collie. They're just like, go, go, go. Some of the exotic cats, like the Savannahs and the Aussie cats, but even some of our domestic short and long hairs are just much more outgoing and active and nosy, and they're busybodies, and they need more than 15 minutes twice a day if the owner can do it, okay? So for me, again, there's no data behind this. It just makes sense, and this is my experience. I think there's a little bit of an art to playing with cats with toys, because if we are trying to mimic or stimulate predatory behavior, then I think the toy play should mimic prey behavior. And how many times have you seen owners or other people take like a fishing pole toy, and they go up and they're kind of flicking it around, and the cat's looking. So the cat's staring at the bird, but not ready to pounce yet. And so then they take it and they sort of start whapping the cat on the head with it, you know? And I'm like, we have mockingbirds in Texas, and you have blue jays up here. Those birds will do that when they're nesting. They will attack you. But for the most part, they play keep away, and the mice certainly don't go and go up and like are beating on the cats. So I really think that actually turns some cats off of play, because it's kind of aversive. So I wonder how many times people have sort of trained the cats not to play with them because they just didn't have good toy play skills with the cat. So I also think they have differing reactions to ground prey versus aerial play. So we know, again, in natural settings, cats will gravitate, partly because of what the queen tended towards. They'll gravitate more towards, say, mice versus birds or lizards or whatever their experience is with. And I've absolutely seen cats where I've pulled out, say, a fishing pole toy that we kind of snake across the ground, and the cat's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of nice. And then you pull out the bird, and the cat's literally, it's like Jim Carrey in The Mask. His eyes go boing, and the cat's just like freaking out and doing backflips. And then I've had it go the other way. We pull the bird out occasionally, and they're sort of like, and then you get one of the little ground draggy toys or a laser pointer, and then they're all over that, okay? So I think people need a little bit more counseling about how to play with the cat, and also to know that play, again, mimics natural hunting behavior to a certain degree. So years ago, somebody did a really cool little study, and they looked at toy play in cats. And what they found in that study was that the cats would play with a toy for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then they would lose interest. But if you brought out a different toy or play game, it would rejuvenate them for another 3 to 5 minutes, and then they would lose interest. Because think about it, once that cat sits there for 30 minutes and goes after the bird, if she misses, she's done, right? It's not like the bird's gonna come right back down and go, try again. The same thing with the mouse. Once you take off after the mouse, chase it around, you're either gonna catch it or it's gonna dive in a crack or a hole, and you're done. You gotta go off and find a different one. So if you think about that play pattern, it kind of makes biological sense with the way cats hunt. So I think it's helpful for people to know that. If he loses interest, try a different game for a while, okay? Or a different toy. So fishing pole toys, a lot of cats will fetch. Stuffed animals. So this is by far, I think, the world's greatest feather toy for cats. When I was putting my toy bag together years ago, you know, I was buying this stuff by myself, and so I was like, oh, I'll just get some cheap cat toys and some little feather toys. And I don't remember at one point, I don't know, I came across this one or somebody told me about it and I went and bought it, but you know, it's like 3 times more expensive than the other feather toys. But oh my God, it is worth every penny, because I'm telling you, they do not react to regular feather toys like they do that. Like, if any of you have regular feather toys and you do not have a bird and you do cats, you need to go get this. Like, it is fantastic, and it's hysterical to watch them. I'm also a big proponent about stuffed animals, so especially for these cats that ambush people in the home. So they're usually kittens or young adults, and they do the leg grab and bite and kick, and then they race off. I get a stuffed animal that's at least half the size of the cat. So I don't mean a little mouse. I mean like another cat, like your leg. And there are a lot of cats that once they have an acceptable item to grab, they really need to be able to get a hold of it and bite it and kick it with their legs. You can significantly reduce the ambushing behavior sometimes just by giving them an outlet like that. Sometimes I'll tie a rope or string to it and either hang it or hook it on the owner's belt loop with like 8 or 10 feet behind. So as they're walking around the house, the toy's kind of bouncing around behind so it moves, just to give them a variability in playing with it so it's not just a dead toy on the ground.
Do you infuse it with anything?
Yeah, absolutely. You can put all kinds of scents on it, like catnip, or, you know, we're going to talk about olfactory stimulation in a little while, and we put all kinds of olfactory stuff in the environment. So Necco flies, another toy that's really popular with a lot of cats. So then there's, of course, a lot of these laser toys that are on the market, which are really nice for, for people that work. So some of these are set on timers, or you could put it on a timer so that when the owner's not there or the owner's busy, that the cats can still be entertained if they like laser pointer type toys. Obviously, one of our greatest challenges for enriching cats is for owners that have other things to do with their life, like go to work. And some of these cats are home by themselves for 8, 10, 14 hours a day, and then the owner gets home and they are understandably tired, and then they're like, wow, and now she wants me to play with the cat for 30 minutes, you know, or whatever. So anything we can do to give them sort of hands-off enrichment is going to help, but I think those interactive play sessions are still super important. Oops, I did that one. So foraging enrichment, there are a lot of toys on the market now. This is actually a dog toy, but way back when, we didn't have any cat feeding enrichment toys, and so we just take little dog toys, and they work fine for some of the cats. This is a homemade box with little toilet paper rolls cut up in it to hide treats in. Obviously doing meal allocations, so especially for single cat homes, taking their daily food ration, dividing it up into 8, 10, 15, 30 aliquots of food and spreading it all over the house. Because again, in the wild, there's not going to be a giant rat come down twice a day. Even if you were to pile mice, there'd still be 10 of them or more. So we want the cat to eat, get hungry later, or still be hungry, and have to go find another food source to get the cat up and moving around and utilizing the space available in the home. It might, or other bugs that the cat can then chase. So like I said, there's all these toys out on the market now. I mean, it's really impressive when you go, you try to update these lectures and you Google food enrichment toys for cats or climbing things, like some of the climbing opportunities they have that you can buy and get for cats now are just amazing. But you can also make stuff too. I mean, so even people on a budget can find a way to do enrichment with their pets. So this isn't called the no bowl feeding system anymore. Anybody in here remember what the new name is? I know, Dr. Pockle, I think, or somebody said it, or maybe it was Dr. Becker. Anyway, when it came out, it was called the no bowl system, and it has some other name now, and I can't remember what it is. And they're basically little mice that you stick food inside their stomachs, and then the cat has to play with them and, kind of pull the food out. So that's a popular foraging enrichment activity for a lot of cats. And then this is actually one of my absolute favorite enrichment activities for cats because it covers the whole predatory sequence and gets the cat active. And as the title says, it is super inexpensive, and it's something that people can do a lot of times simultaneously with other activities like watching television. And it works better on a slick surface. And basically we just thump cat treats or pieces of food down and let the cat chase them. And they get to chase it, catch it, and eat it.
Indoor hunting feeder.
Yeah.
That's the no bowl.
Oh, that's what it's called? Indoor hunting feeder? I guess they thought that was a much more impressive name. One of the cases I went to see, it was a cat they found outside. They brought him inside thinking they were doing the right thing, and he was just awesome for 2 weeks. And then he started to get really aggressive. Like he was biting them, they couldn't pet him, and he was ambushing, and he was cranky. And I came into the house, and while we're going through the history and talking, they had some treats or his food, I don't remember what it was, and I did this game for 30 minutes down the front entryway of their house. Like the cat was in absolute heaven. He just chased mouse after mouse treat after mouse treat after mouse treat down the hallway, literally, and by the time he's like, and I left, and 2 weeks later they came back, because we gave him this enrichment program. They were like, he's like a completely different cat, because really his entire problem was that he lacked enrichment. He's in prison, So this is a great game for them to do because it's easy. So other food items, if they'll eat them or play with them, fruits and vegetables, growing cat grass, catnip, fresh or freeze-dried, obviously cat treats that you can hide, or just to provide variability too, different textures and odors and tastes. Then looking at exploration and climbing. We want to increase the functional size of the house, even for a single cat, because remember, single cat may utilize a huge amount of space in its home range, but definitely if there are multiple cats in the home, we need to try to create more space, and that means either letting the cats outside, annexing parts of the home that aren't being used, like maybe there are closed off rooms or a back, screened in porch that the cats have never had access to, or it means going vertically, all right? Any of you in here heard of The Cat's House by Bob Walker? Okay, so this is basically interior design for your cats, like ways to do relatively aesthetically pleasing designing, pathways and things like that to help the cats not only use space, but the other nice thing about arrangements like this is it allows the cats to pass through the house without being down nose-to-nose level. So one cat can cross through the room up high, the other cat crosses through the room on the floor, and they don't have to encounter each other and then get into a conflict, okay? It also allows the cats to avoid other annoying individuals like dogs and children or even visitors. Oh, what a beautiful cat! That want to pet the cat, and it gives the cat ways to increase their exercise, because this just gives you even more places to hide food allocations or to add in, for example, olfactory enrichment opportunities. So cat towers, these should be strategically placed when possible, either near windows so that they get a benefit of looking outside, or socially significant areas. So for example, this is in the entryway, because when the owners or the visitors come in, the cats are really social, and then they have a place to jump up there and sort of be in a safe area to greet the visitor or the owner. So we try to get them to put them in places, obviously, where the cat wants to use them. It's kind of like scratching posts. A lot of times people have great scratching posts, and then they hide the scratching post because they don't want people to see it, and then it's in a location where the cat doesn't want to use it. So other cat tower arrangement, like I said, you go online now or on Google, there's all kinds of cool stuff like that that you can find that look pretty aesthetically pleasing, or you can even use them, multitask them, like, I don't know, put books in some of those cubby holes and have other cubby holes for cats. Come on. And don't you know what happened? Cat shelving, same thing. There are a lot of these available in different arrangements that you can, again, increase window space by adding perches near windows so the cats don't have to fight over the windowsills, and just giving them other ways to. I would love to have a house where I could do that, don't you, for cats? Like, I went into a client's house years ago. I went there to see her dogs, and I walked into her living room, and there was these shelving that looked kind of like this that went up and around the top, and they had like Christmas lights strung on them, and I was like, oh, look, she tried to make her house look like, a hobbit hole, and then I paused for a second, and I was like, oh my gosh, those are cat paths. But that's not what it looked like when I first walked in there, it just looked like it made the room look really cool and kind of Lord of the Rings-like, and then I realized it was for cats, which was really cool too, but what is wrong with my little button? These are brand new batteries, supposedly. All right, we're just going to do this by hand. So other exploratory items, rotating in tactile experiences. So a lot of people use boxes and bags and things like that, but one of the things that's really important for people to understand is enrichment is about variability and novelty. You have to rotate it. I went into a house with a cat once, and she had a box on the floor that was about this size. It might have been an old, like, beer can case, box. And the cat, liked it and stuff. And then she had a pile of stuff over by the side of her living room, and there was this big 4-foot-long box that was about 4 or 5 inches square. So long, skinny box. And I was like, what's all that stuff over there? And she's like, oh, that's recycling. And as she's saying that, I walk over and I pick this big box up, and I'm like, oh, well, did you ever try giving this to your cat? And I dumped it on the ground as I was saying this, and she's like, well, no, he has a box over there. And then she turns around and looks. The cat's already inside the box. Like, he dives into it, he runs all the way through, pokes his head out the other end, and then proceeded to play in there for a while, even though he couldn't turn around. But the thing is, it's a different box. Every box that comes to your house smells different because it comes from somewhere different in the country, probably. It had different stuff inside it. And every shape and weight of the box is a different tactile experience for the cat. So you're getting an olfactory change and you're getting a tactile change, which is why you got to rotate the stuff. And don't give them the same shaped box all the time, okay? I need to quit putting this. So water can be enriching for some cats too. And when you go on YouTube, there's actually quite a lot of cats that play weird games in bathtubs and flushing the toilet repeatedly and things like that. Some of the exotic bred cats actually seem to really like water, but obviously this is just a regular domestic short hair. And if nothing else, they're just fun to watch. Oh, darn it. Oh, there he goes. So these are simple things to do. I mean, who doesn't have a water spigot in their house, you know? I don't think I'd want my cat figuring out how to flush the toilet, though. Everybody seen that video? It came out years ago. That was hysterical. And then locomotor enrichment, so the cat wheels. I was really ambivalent when those came out. Because you do some research about like wheel running in rodents, and there's a lot of controversy over whether wheel running is actually a compulsive behavior or, whether it's kind of a healthy exercise outlet. And I think I don't really have a problem with the wheel running now, as long as it isn't. It's part of a bigger program. It's kind of like treadmill use with dogs. And people are like, your dog needs more exercise. And they're like, well, what if I just get him a treadmill? Well, it could be part of the program, but treadmills aren't exactly enriching in the other sensory modalities. Like treadmills for dogs don't get the dog out of the house where they can smell different things and see different things. And wheel running is just one sensory modality. So I think they just need to be sure that there are other enrichment protocols in place as well. And then we mentioned before doing leash walking, as long as you have a safe location to do that and people take the time to adequately train the cat to walk on the harness and leash, and they aren't scared when they go outside. I mentioned before about cat fencing, so theperfectfence.com. You can't really see it too well in here, but a lot of times the fencing either sits on top of the existing fence or it can be a pen inside the yard. So there's different ways to do it. And again, taking them out on leash walks. Years ago when the cat I had, I'd put her a little harness and I'd put a long leash on her. Like, she'd have like a 20-foot leash, and we'd go out to a park and I just let her wander around and sniff stuff. And one of my really good friends has leash trained her cat, and she lives in an apartment now, so she takes her cat out for walks as long as she can find safe times and locations to get him out. And then olfactory enrichment, I think this is one of the things that we forget a lot of times, meaning that we don't pointedly do olfactory enrichment enough with dogs or cats. And we have to remember what a huge part of the animal's life olfactory stimulation is. So for those of you that have cats, when you come home from wherever you're doing, what do the cats do? I mean, I know what my cat would. I'd walk in the door and immediately she was like, and then she was all over my feet, like all over, like, oh my God, what's that? Even my dog does that to some degree, except my dog doesn't, my dog goes more places, So it's not quite as novel for her, the odors, because usually whatever odors I have on me, she was there with me. But just letting the cat come in and smell what's on your body is enriching. Or, for example, I think this is a video actually. I do this with my dogs, is when I go grocery shopping, because I don't have a cat right now, I bring all the bags home and I set them on the floor. Because I want the animal to be able to go through and sniff and investigate whatever I brought home from the store, because it's just a little olfactory enrichment activity, you know. When I go to house calls, we have our little house call cat bag, and I'm telling you, it is the greatest enrichment experience most of those cats have, is to get to explore that bag, because that bag's been to so many homes. It's filled with cat treats and toys and catnip. I mean, it's like Walt Disney World in a bag, and they're like, they sit in it and they rub in it, and like, it's just that one little experience, okay? And this was really bizarre, but apparently this is a thing in cats, which is olives. Dr. Becker mentioned this, I think, yesterday. This video's not showing up really well. Basically, he pours olive juice on the ground and then he wipes it up. And then the cat come in, and there's more than one video like this out there, so this isn't a fluke. And they act like it's catnip. It's really weird. But I've just now recently, or when I came across this, started with the olive juice thing, but I've for a long time had people say, go into your cabinets and find an extract or an herb or a spice, and on a routine basis, put something out. Go into the cabinet, say a little bit of basil, I'm gonna put a little bit of basil up on my cat's cat tower today, or on a shelf, or his cat bed, or I'm gonna put a tiny little bit of some type of an extract, just a little, you're not trying to overpower them, on one of the cat toys. So the next time the cat goes by, they go, what? That was not there before. I don't really like it, but that wasn't there before. So it doesn't always have to be good. I mean, I don't purposely put bad stuff out there, but sometimes they try it and then they're like, oh. And you're like, okay, but it's still enriching. It still changes the behavior. The sand on my laundry room floor is not desirable, but it still makes me behave, you know? It makes me do something. And that's what we're trying to do, is get the cats to do stuff and explore and interact with their environment. So the other thing we don't think about are prey scents. Like you can go to stores that cater to hunters, or maybe somebody that you know that hunts, and get these odors of, like, you know, deer pee and stuff like that. And, or if you know somebody that has, you know, gerbils or whatever, I'll tell owners to go to the pet store and see if they'll give them just a little baggie full of some of the dirty shavings out of one of the rodent cages. And then I come home and we either stick it in like a T-ball or something like that, or rub it on their toys, or shake the toy up inside of it and give it to them, to put a different olfactory scent into the environment. So enrichment's a lot about getting creative, and again, also sometimes trying to find relatively easy, inexpensive ways to change what's going on in the environment. One of my other ones I forgot to mention before under predatory stuff is we have people get feeder crickets from the pet store, and you can either dump them in the bathtub or get one of those big tall-sided storage boxes, dump the crickets inside. Anybody in here done that before? Yeah, this is like really hysterical. I know. One of my clients, she goes, they kill them so fast, I just throw them on my floor now. She comes home and she just goes, poof, and she's like, they're dead like that. Like, she doesn't even worry about them getting loose in the house. So that's really fun. My brother's a herpetologist, so I grew up around a lot of bizarre, you know, animals, and so we always had snake sheds, and I'm telling you, it's really entertaining to give cats snake sheds sometimes. So they're non-toxic. I don't really care if they eat them because it's just skin. And they make a kind of crinkly sound when they play with them. And of course, they have a really novel odor to them too. So you're hitting taste, tactile, olfactory, and auditory. You're really getting all of your sensory modalities in one enrichment activity. But there are other types of like skins or things that you bring in your house that you might just let the cat investigate. And this probably works better for dogs, but other types of aromatherapy, when I say aromatherapy, I mean things that the animal might actually find interesting. So, you know, lavender's nice and calming, but I want the cat, you know, to try to bring scents in that the cat may find interesting. So sometimes if they have outdoor access, or like when we do this with dogs, we'll make digging pits and we'll like bury some poo-poo in the digging pit from, you know, like a horse or whatever. And so they go out in their digging pit and they find something entertaining there. Something different. And for a dog, that's sort of like Christmas. Auditory enrichment, so music, TV, radio, you know, they have the CDs and the DVDs for like the cat TV that has the bird DVD of the bird feeder and stuff. So again, you get some visual and auditory enrichment out of that. Mentioned about the cat posts and cat videos, fish tanks or animal tanks. So as long as it's not too stressful for the small prey species, these can be quite entertaining. So again, I grew up with a sort of menagerie. We had finches and I had mice and we had cats, and you know, the cats loved to sit on the dresser and watch the finches in the cage. They never did anything, or I wouldn't have let that happen, but sometimes it's great enrichment for the cat as long as it isn't, you know, damaging the welfare of the you know, finches or the gerbils or whatever that you had. And then interaction with other animals, so dogs and cats playing together, or compatible cats having time with each other, obviously. And then interaction with people, too, because training is a great enrichment activity and can help keep the cat mobile, moving, and also allows you to teach skills that might help with other behavior issues. And it is good cognitive stimulation as well. Then you ever seen the Daniel King cat agility stuff? Well, for those of you that haven't, you should go check this out, and you should show it to all your cat clients too when they think that they can't do stuff with their cat. I don't know how old this kid is now. He's been doing this for a while, and he has some phenomenal videos on not only how to get started, but just really impressive stuff that he's done training his cats to do agility. But again, you think about the enrichment value and the exercise value of this activity. Like, it's fantastic. This is kind of what these cats would be doing in the wild, running, jumping, and climbing. There just aren't any mice involved. I don't think he probably has too many friends, but I couldn't help but think that whenever I watched these. I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but he's a fantastic cat trainer, but he clearly spends hours doing this. Because it probably would have been me, you know, way back at that age. So I think he has, there's 2 or 3 cats that he works. But anyway, they're super impressive. I could watch these all day, and I won't bore you by watching them all day. But any questions?
I had a question. When you were talking about routine of your dogs being fed between 5 and 9, so Carlsted's research that just emphasizes how important the routine is for the cats for reducing stress. Where's the limit between what's routine and what's not routine? You know what I mean?
That's a good question. She says, what's the limit between what's routine and, like, when does variation in routine become stressful rather than helpful? And I'm sure there's not a specific answer for that. I think it will vary from the individual animal, and I think it also matters how it's introduced. You know, if you take a cat that's used to being fed at 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., right? And then you're like, oh, I'm going to start changing that. And, like the very next day, you try to feed the cat at 9 o'clock at night, the cat's going to be extremely stressed out. But if you can find a way, say, to come home and say, maybe I'm going to give you a little bit of food, but then I'm going to do some training for a while, and then, or play with you for a while, and then feed you dinner, 20 minutes later or whatever, so the cat isn't just sitting at the bowl going, rah, rah, for 20 minutes. I think if we can start slowly introducing some of that variability, which really is going to be a little bit easier if you're starting to do variable foraging enrichment anyway, because the cat's going to be eating more frequently, I still think there's benefit to that. Now, I do think there are some cats that are so sensitive to changes that sometimes limiting some of what they experience is, especially I'm thinking about some of these urine marking cats that they urine mark everywhere, but if you go lock them in the bedroom, they stop urine marking, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with other cats in the house. And it's partly because they just don't have to deal with all the change that's going on in other aspects of the house. Like, they have less to worry about, if you will. So I think there are some cats where we have to be really careful about varying things too much, but I think in general we need to try to work through and make that change more routine.
Do you think that would be extra true for a shelter environment where things are kind of, as the nature of the environment, more stressful anyway, and you'd be more likely to want to do things on the routine, or do you think you would have that would play into that?
She said, do I think it would be more important to keep routine in a shelter environment? And, oh, the cupcakes are here. Sorry, I'm distracted now. I really am now distracted. So, and I think it also, you have to look at, are we talking about just feeding? Or are we talking about variability and other things? So maybe in a shelter, maybe having the feeding routine, but starting to make sure there's variability in other things. Like, I think shelter animals really need enrichment a lot because their world is really small. And again, if they get too acclimated to that tiny little microcosm, especially if they're there for a while, and then they go into a house with kids and a family and coffee makers and stuff, I think that's really stressful too. So I don't have a set answer for you, I just don't want them to get rigid. I think it's important that we don't let their environment get rigid.
I do a lot of volunteer work with zoos, and I know there's been studies with zoo animals that, a lot of enrichment is good, especially when they have cats there, they're using all factory, it's toys, but they found that varying the feed time stresses the tigers and other cow. But giving them, take different proteins and put it on a log and toss it in.
Yeah.
They love that. But, so that's what I.
Yeah, so she said she's read some studies in zoo animals where literally there's a lot of literature about enrichment in the zoo world because it's so critical, where at least with some of the species, varying their feeding times was stressful, but they still tried to make variability in other aspects. And you can make variability maybe in adding other feeding times, maybe not saying, okay, he eats twice a day and I'm just going to move this time around. Maybe you still eat there, but maybe there are other little feeding times that help introduce variability that might then, for some individuals, it may be important to try to make some variability in the actual feeding time. So, for example, some of the dogs, for example, that have separation distress, and there are some cats that have separation distress, but I tell owners absolutely not to feed their dog right when they get home from work, because if they're late, not only is the animal upset by the absence and the change in when the owner came home, but now they're upset because their feeding time has been changed. And the same thing in the morning. I don't think it's necessarily healthy for people to wake up and feed the animal right away, because sometimes then they can't let you sleep in. Like, make the feeding time not a time on the clock, but related to something that's happening in the schedule. You know, like, I get up, I get ready, let you out, whatever, take a shower, blah, 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 and then we eat. Not like the alarm goes off at 6, and then I feed you. So, you know, it's just like me. My alarm goes off at 6, and now sometimes I wake up at like 5 or 5:30 because my body knows the alarm's going to go off. Well, some of the dogs then wake up and go, hey, look, we're going to be eating in 30 minutes. You might as well get up now. You know, or the cat's like, rah, rah. So I want a little space in there so that I do think it helps prevent some problems like that, to get away again from that rigid schedule. Like, you know, you might eat at 6:45, but maybe it'll be 7. And just go with the flow.
What I found is very helpful is not time change and all of that, rotation as far as enrichment, all of that stays rotational, always changing. But as far as the stability comes from your litter box stays in the same location, your water bowl stays in the same location, and they always get fed in the same location. But everything else is a free-for-all, and that seems to work really well as far as they have that small amount of stability. But if they can get used to everything else, they'll be easier to go with the flow.
Any others? All right, time for cupcakes.